So some notable mines in this district would be the Cerro Vanguardia mine, just 30 kilometers north of El Zanjon, Cerro Negro, which is owned and operated by Newmont. That one's closer to our Venidero project. These are multi-million ounce mines. As I mentioned before, Cerro Vanguardia has produced over 6 million ounces of gold and 80 million ounces of silver. And so really what drew us to El Zanjon is that being so close to Cerro Vanguardia, it actually sits on the same regional structure. And as that major fault zone passes through Cerro Vanguardia, it makes a big bend. And as it makes this bend, it creates a, sort of a dilation zone around the elbow of that bend. There's got to be, I think, at least like 100 silver and gold bearing veins that have been discovered in that area. But that same regional fault then continues to the south, and as it passes through our El Zanjon property, it makes another big bend like that. So we believe we have the potential for another one of these sort of elbow dilation zones down there, and we're looking for a repeat of the structural and geological conditions that host Cerro Vanguardia, but down at El Zanjon.
And it's nice to actually hear a real, like, actual exploration discovery story because like they don't happen anymore.
Well, people try to say, oh, the best place to find a gold mine is under a head frame, right? So they keep drilling
Yeah.
under old projects, and it's true. You can pretty much always find some gold down there, but I find you're accomplishing two things when you're doing mineral exploration, and people usually talk about one of them. People talk about what you find, but the other thing that you're doing as you're exploring is you're also sort of determining what's not there. So you're reducing the potential of what you could potentially find, right? So you're like, oh, we know there's not gold over here. There's only low grade stuff over here. So you're kind of shrinking in the potential of any project. But when you start on these big grassroots projects like we've been working on at Opinaca and El Zanjon, there's no history of that exploration. There's no history of that drilling. So there's nothing on the what's not there list yet. So that keeps the optimism high and the potential still out there for making these big multi-million ounce discoveries. I find a lot of people or a lot of companies that are drilling on more legacy assets or areas with a lot of history of exploration. They've got a lot of potential for finding gold out there. They're successful at finding gold, but again, because a lot of that area has been sort of drilled off elsewhere, they might have potential to make a million ounce discovery, and which is exciting. But these days, I think what really moves the needle in the market is the multi-million ounce discoveries. The 2 million ounces or 3 million ounces is kind of the new 1 million ounce sort of thing. So if you're drilling in these older areas, a lot of them, you kind of know that you're not going to make a 5 million ounce discovery out there. But we could very much make those types of discoveries on the assets that we're working on at Targa.
For disclosure purposes, our site does not make recommendations for purchases or sale of stocks, services, or products. Nothing on our site or this podcast should be construed as an offer or solicitation to buy or sell products or securities. All investing involves risk and possible losses. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For disclosure purposes, Targa Exploration Corporation is a paid-for client on the Investor Ideas website.
Cameron, it's great to have you on the show. For our following that is new to Targa Exploration, do you want to start at the beginning of how you founded the company and your first flagship project?
So the company went public towards the end of 2022. I joined probably partway through 2023, but the company Targa was incubated out of the Inventa Capital Group, located in Vancouver. So that's where we have our head office, and we share that office with probably about a half a dozen companies or so under that Inventa Capital umbrella. So we keep our back office expenses down and put all the money that we raise in the ground. But originally we were a lithium explorer back in sort of 2022, 2023. And we were doing early stage exploration across a pretty big portfolio all over Canada. And on one of those projects, our Opinaca project, that had no history of mineral exploration prior to our acquisition of that project that we acquired from Kennerly Minerals, the project generator. And it was sort of in those early sort of 1 or 2 seasons of work up there, doing regional till sampling across the project, where we came up with a big gold anomaly, about 7 kilometers in size, right in the middle of the project. And so lithium prices at that time were pretty low, and gold was on the way up. So we made a pretty natural pivot to gold exploration. So now we are fully focused, early stage grassroots gold exploration, looking to make new gold discoveries. The first discovery of which we did announce in January this year at that Opinaca project in Quebec. We did a maiden drill program out there last year, made a nice big discovery. And now we have new projects in southern Argentina as well, in the province of Santa Cruz, and we're actively drilling on our El Zanjon project. So now we're fully focused on making gold discoveries. We've got one gold discovery under our belt already at Opinaca, and then we're looking to make hopefully another discovery at El Zanjon in the near future. Already seen some visible gold in the first hole, so I think we're on the right track.
It's been a very exciting start to 2026 for you, 100%. Do you want to go a little more into detail with Opinaca, like the land package? Because you have quite a big land package there. Also, you have project partnership with Kennerland. Do you want to talk a little bit about that discovery? Because you said like it's never been drilled before, so you weren't going off historics or any of those things. Like, how big were the step outs? How did you plan that as far as finding that discovery?
Sure. Yeah. It had zero history of exploration, so no historic drill holes. The project itself, like you said, quite large in size. We have about 67,000 hectares in size up there. When we made that first original discovery of the till anomaly from that regional sampling, since we were sort of the first movers in that area, we were able to expand out and stake some additional grounds. That's why we have a nice big ground coverage up there. And so we have a partnership on that with Kennerland Minerals. We now own 100% of the asset, but they still retain a 3% NSR, and we still retain them as project operator at Opinaca. So Kennerland executes all of the field programs for us up there, from the early stage work that we did back in the summers of 2023 and 2024. They also managed our drill program out there last year, and they'll be managing our drill program later this year as well. We'd like to get back there sort of probably in August to do maybe a 4,000 or 5,000 meter drill program. Yeah, I mean, the history of it, like I said, it's mostly covered in glacial till up in that area, so not a lot of bedrock exposure. And of course, in the key area where we believe there was a likely to be a mineralized system buried below the till based on that till sampling, not really any outcrop at all. So we don't have any mineralized outcrops that we've seen to date where we see gold in the actual outcrop. We just see it in the till where we're analyzing under the microscope some of those samples and seeing gold grains. We've seen a few boulders as well that are gold bearing in that area, but it wasn't until we actually went out with that drill program in the fall of last year, we actually got a good picture of the bedrock and actually started seeing some mineralized bedrock in that core. And so for that drill program, in terms of picking the drill locations, because again, no mineralized outcrop to go on, almost exclusively based on the geochemistry, that till sampling that we did, and where we start to see a termination of the gold in the till in the up ice direction there. So we figured it's got to be sort of in that 7 kilometer long band. So we did 8 holes up there. We did a bit of geophysics ahead of time, but it wasn't super useful. And we got really lucky. We ended up hitting gold in 7 out of 8 of those drill holes. And so those drill holes were spaced over a strike length of about 4 kilometers. Again, we hit gold in almost every single hole. That 4 kilometer strike length sits within the wider 7 kilometer till anomaly up there. So we do believe there's more potential to keep stepping out to the east and west and hopefully keep hitting more gold out that way. We still have a ton of room in between those drill holes to continue drilling. So we did basically 3 drill fences more or less last year, 2 kilometers between each drill fence. So again, huge open space in between. We're seeing multi-gram gold in each of those drill fences. And the highlight of that drill program was hole number 7, which is in the western drill fence, and where we hit about 13.8 grams per ton over 3.65 meters. And within that was a really nice high-grade section that was about 30 centimeters wide, had some really nice coarse visible gold in it, and that was about 166 grams per ton. So we've got some nice high grade out there. This year we got to go back out and obviously fill in the blanks, start connecting those dots, starting to see if we can understand what is controlling the gold mineralization up there. Obviously, it's a very broadly mineralized system across that big strike length. And we really going to start honing in to find, where is there a center of mass? Where can we start seeing some of these good grades over wider widths more consistently and start connecting the dots?
I'm assuming most of the investors know James Bay area fairly well and have heard of it before, but some of the neighbors like Chichu and some of those that might give them a little bigger picture idea of the property?
Yeah, sure. In terms of like what we're looking for out there. So the project itself sits within what's called the Opinaca subprovince, which is mostly a metamorphic grade environment, metasediments with igneous intrusions. So it's not your traditional greenstone belt where most gold exploration takes place in Quebec and Ontario, but we're sitting close to a subprovincial boundary. And so the main gold deposits up in this area, they actually sit sort of along that boundary region, sort of along the periphery between the Opinaca subprovince and the La Grande subprovince. And so the more notable deposits up in that area that kind of sit within that sort of boundary zone would be the Chichu deposit, as you mentioned. That's owned by Fury Gold. It's currently a 3 million ounce gold deposit. It is undeveloped. We really like that as an analog for what we're potentially looking for up at Opinaca, just based on what we saw in the drill core last year. The textures, the mineralogy, the host rock, very, very, very similar looking to what they see over at Chichu, particularly the presence of a tonalite, which is an intrusive rock. Most of the ounces hosted at that 3 million ounce Chichu deposit occur within a tonalite, and we're starting to see more of that tonalite unit occurring in our drill program, particularly in that western fence where we had the highest grade interval. So a lot of our drilling this year will likely focus sort of around that western fence as well, looking for more of that tonalite, looking for some more consistent intervals. But also in that area close to Chichu, you have the Eleanor Gold Mine. That was formerly a Gold Corp operation operating for many years, producing millions of ounces of gold. It was taken over by Newmont, sold to Dilmar, so that's still in operation today. I believe they still produce about 250,000 ounces of gold per year there. So these are the sorts of big tier type deposits that we're looking for, multi-million ounce systems that can produce, hundreds of thousands of ounces per year. That's really the prize that we're looking to get after at Opinaca.
I love that the story is actually a real discovery because that's so rare to hear. Most places use past historics and past producing mines. So to actually hear a true discovery story is fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the future is for the rest of this year? Like, are you going to add on more geophysics for the property? Or are you just planning on drilling it out as you come to the close for this year? Or?
Yeah, so specifically for Opinaca, again, we'd like to do a phase 2 drill program there this year. We haven't found geophysics too effective because while the gold does seem to be associated with some other mineralization, like some traces of pyrite and arsenopyrite, we're not seeing a high percentage of those minerals in the core, even when we do have good gold grades. There's definitely some association with them, and we see elevated arsenic where we see the gold. But it's really not like a heavy mineralized system that we could really pick up with like an IP program, for example. We did do like a mag survey over there prior to the drill program last year. We saw what we thought was a big round anomaly kind of in the middle of the project, and we kind of used that to help guide the drill program. But we also see like a lot of magnetite rich sand in the till that covers it that can kind of impact what we see on the magnetics a little bit. And when we actually drilled the core, we didn't see a big change in magnetic susceptibility sort of inside or outside the areas where we had gold. So unfortunately, geophysics not going to be too useful out here. I think a lot of it's just going to be dependent on the drill bit. We do have another till anomaly on the same project about 15 kilometers further to the east of the main one that we've been drilling. That remains undrill tested. If we have the budget for it and the meters, so we'll try to do a drill hole out there as well this year. And then up to the northeast, we have a big arsenic anomaly that didn't have as much gold in it, but it's certainly an interesting area for us. So that could potentially be another target, and that's at least 5+ kilometers to the northeast of the main anomaly. So we've definitely got some other things going on within the system here that we could potentially test this year. But really, the plan is to get back in within those drill fences that we did last year, looking for some more consistency in gold grades, and focusing some more of those meters towards the west, where we saw some more interesting geology and some higher grades of gold last year.
I'd love to switch gears and talk about your Argentinian projects, El Zanjon. That has never been drilled before as well, correct?
That's correct. Very, very similar setup to Opinaca in terms of it's never been drilled previously, and the targets there are largely a combination of geochemistry and geophysics, because at El Zanjon, similar to Opinaca, so we don't have any bedrock on the project, even less than at Opinaca. Opinaca, at least we have some sporadic bedrock here and there. At El Zanjon, right now the project covers 57,000 hectares, so it's almost the same size as Opinaca, but there's only outcrop in one location in the northwest area of the project at the bottom of a lagoon. When the water level is low, you can see a little outcrop area. But other than that, the whole project is covered in a tertiary sediment. So that's a post-mineralization sediment, probably a marine sediment of some kind. Half of it's gravel and sand, and the other half of it's sort of a marine mud, if you will. And it's about 40 to 50 meters thick, depending on where you are on the project. So it's very much relying on geochemistry and geophysics again to pick our drill targets out there.
You just announced some of your first results from there, which are pretty outstanding to start the drill program off. Congratulations on that, for you to go dive deeper for investors and following.
Yeah, so we've got the drill program underway right now. We only just completed the second hole over the weekend. But what you're referring to, what we announced, I think, on Tuesday last week, is when we're drilling the very first hole, which we don't have assays from yet, but samples have been sent to the lab, is the presence of visible gold that we saw in the very first drill hole, which was incredibly exciting for the team to see. And really why that stands out, obviously visible gold means at least there's some gold in the system. 3 key questions. Or 30 kilometers away at the Cerro Benguardi mine, there's a very big system out there. They produced over 6 million ounces of gold and 80 million ounces of silver. we're looking for one of those at Zanjon, but because no one's ever seen any of the bedrock before, no one knows for certain if there's going to be epithermal systems. And we were able to definitively say, yes, we do have an epithermal system here. We can tell from the geology and mineralogy what we're seeing in that core. Question number two is any system that we find going to be fertile with precious metals? Again, we don't have assays back yet, but seeing the presence of visible gold and what we believe is also electrum in the drill core, electrum being a natural alloy of silver and gold, certainly answers that question of whether or not we're going to find fertile ground somewhere on the project already. And question number three is really the strategy that we're employing to develop drill targets in an area where we can't see any of the bedrock. Is that ultimately going to be effective in producing quality targets that result in mineralized hits? And I think the fact that we drilled our first target here and that first target hit visible gold, directly where we expected the target to be. I think, obviously that's only one data point, but that's a pretty strong observation to support our process and our methodology for using geophysics and using this geochemistry to generate targets on this project. That geochemistry that we're using is called ionic leach geochemistry. So we're effectively taking a soil sample, but since this gravel and the soil that we're sampling is not a decomposing bedrock like it would be in other sorts of environments, like really representing the bedrock there, we're looking for gold and silver ions that are potentially leaching from the bedrock below that overburden through water cycles and making their way up to the surface. And so we're looking for a few parts per billion of gold and silver. So really, weak signals that could indicate that there's something down there. It was obviously a big risk to get out there and drill the first couple of holes to test these theories. But I think even with just that first drill hole, we've either definitively answered or very strongly supported both of those questions that we're seeking to answer with this drill program.
What was the reason, or what really drew you to the two projects in Argentina to add on to Targa Exploration? And can you talk a little bit, I guess, about both of them and the size of the land package? And they're both an option agreement, is that correct?
That's correct. So we have the option to earn up to an 80% interest in both the Zanjon and the Venidero project, both of them located in Santa Cruz, Argentina. Zanjon is about 57,000 hectares today. We actually added on to the project earlier this year in January to sort of protect some of our boundaries. So it's grown since the first option agreement. And then Venidero is around 10,000 hectares or so. It's a little bit more to the west in Santa Cruz. And it's a bit of an earlier stage project. So we'll be working on generating some drill targets at that project over the next 1 or 2 years for a future drill program and sort of bring it in the pipeline. But so these projects came originally from Rugby Resources. The early stage work, that geophysics, that geochemistry, that was all conducted by them over the last several years. And this was Rugby Resource was a company that was sort of spearheaded by Bryce Roxburgh, who has actually recently joined our board of directors and brings 50 years of discovery making experience with him. Fantastic to have him on our team. But Rugby Resources got acquired by what is now Andina Copper last year to get a hold of a discovery they made in Colombia called Cabrasco. So Zanjon and Venidero were sort of the next projects they were lining up for drill programs after they made that discovery. And so as part of that acquisition of Rugby Resources, these two projects were spun out into another unlisted company right now called Aegis Resources. Has a few other assets in the company, but really they were looking for a group to come and option these Santa Cruz projects from them. Zanjon being pretty much already drill ready when we optioned it. And so we were kind of front of the line to put our hands up and go after these projects. And the reason why we really like them, particularly Zanjon, because it's a little more advanced, but Santa Cruz is a fantastic jurisdiction for mining and exploration, very supportive provincial government. In Argentina, the resources are really managed by the provinces. So it really depends province to province where you are in terms of local support and supportive laws and things like that. So Santa Cruz, very good mining province. And then the Desierto Massif, which is the sort of Jurassic Age volcanic geological environment that we're sitting in for both these projects, is very well known for hosting tier 1 type epithermal, low sulfidation epithermal gold and silver deposits. So some notable mines in this district would be the Cerro Vanguardia mine, just 30 kilometers north of Zanjon, Cerro Negro, which is owned and operated by Newmont. That one's closer to our Venidero project. These are multi-million ounce mines. As I mentioned before, Cerro Vanguardia has produced over 6 million ounces of gold and 80 million ounces of silver. And so really what drew us to El Zanjon is that being so close to Cerro Vanguardia, it actually sits on the same regional structure. And as that major fault zone passes through Cerro Vanguardia, it makes a big bend. And as it makes this bend, it creates sort of a dilation zone around the elbow of that bend. And it's in that dilation zone where you get all the mineralization, the epithermal vein systems coming up that form the Cerro Vanguardia deposit. So there's got to be, I think, at least like 100 silver and gold bearing veins that have been discovered in that area. But that same regional fault then continues to the south, and as it passes through our El Zanjon property, it makes another big bend like that. So we believe we have the potential for another one of these sort of elbow dilation zones down there, and we're looking for a repeat of the structural and geological conditions that host Cerro Vanguardia, but down at El Zanjon. Now they're lucky up at Cerro Vanguardia. They sit within an erosional window, so the bedrock is actually exposed up there. So decades ago, those veins were prospected and discovered, and it's been in operation since the late 90s. El Zanjon has not been drilled or looked at because no one could see any bedrock there. So we think we have the potential to sit on a similar style system at Cerro Vanguardia, and that's what we're trying to prove with our drill programs right now. So that's what really drew us to there, was the potential to host, one of these big systems, had a lot of good supporting data at a regional and local level, to support the drill targets and to support that theory. And I think we're off to a very good start with the visible gold and things that we've seen in just the first couple of holes.
Assuming that you continue to see fantastic results and those drill holes come out with some great results, is that going to be your main focus going into the summer to expand that drill program and then Opinaca after, or are you going to simultaneously do both?
One of the reasons too why we have them on sort of projects at opposite ends of the Americas is, when it's prime time summer season for drilling up in northern Canada, it's winter down in southern Patagonia. They do get snow down there on those projects. So ideally, we'd be kind of going back and forth between the two, but it really depends on the results of this first program as well. In terms of timing for Opinaca, we're looking at kind of late July and into August for that drill program, which is really heavily dependent on Kennerland's team's schedule as well, since they do a lot of exploration throughout Canada throughout the good season here. So we kind of have to work with their team's schedule as well for when they can fit us in. But in terms of, right now we're drilling about 2,250 meters for this drill program at El Zanjon. It's probably going to take another 45 days or so, depending on how drilling goes to complete that. It is going a little bit slower. This overburden is a little bit challenging to drill through, but the drill crews are working on that and making some good improvements on drill progress. But whether or not we expand that drill program or pause and wait to come back later will really be dependent on what the results from the lab look like over the coming weeks. We should see a turnaround time of about 3 to 4 weeks, we believe, for assays down there. That's what they've told us, but we haven't actually gotten any assays back, so we don't have anything to go on there. But hopefully they can stick with that 3 to 4 week schedule, which would mean that we could potentially see some assays back from the first few holes before we complete the last few holes. So we could potentially make some decisions then, whether or not we want to add a few extra hundreds of meters, put a couple extra drill holes in there as part of this program, or something much bigger if obviously we have some spectacular results. So we'll just have to wait over the coming, 1 or 2 months to see what those look like.
Can you talk a little bit about the team that you have in place? I know that today you even just announced a new VP of exploration, and then anything that like background or history that management has worked in Argentina as well?
We've got a great team that we've assembled over the last couple of years, kind of adding the right pieces along the way. Obviously, kind of at the board and advisory level, we've got some great people behind us, not just from Inventa Capital, but also from Discovery Group. So Jim Paterson's our chairman. He's one of the co-founders and principals at Discovery Group. His partner there, John Robbins, is one of our strategic advisors. And then we've also got Craig Perry joining us from Inventa Capital as one of our strategic advisors as well. And, these gentlemen have done a tremendous amount of business in this industry, not just in making great discoveries, but also making sure that those discoveries translate to value creation success for their shareholders and big exits for those shareholders and takeouts. John and Jim were part of the Great Bear discovery and the sale of that to Kinross and Kaminak, which they sold to Goldcorp. Bryce Roxburgh, who's our newest director that I mentioned, he just joined us back in March. He's been making discoveries for the last 50 years, including in Argentina. So he actually, him and his team advanced the Cerro Moro discovery sort of back in the early sort of 2012, 2013 era, I believe it was. But they ended up selling that to Yamana Gold for over $400 million. And Cerro Moro is in that same district that we're in down in Santa Cruz. So definitely we've got some good local experience. And then on the ground, we're working with the same local geological team, Argentinian team, that helped them advance that Cerro Moro discoveries. And they also did all the early stage work at Zanjon and Venidero, and even kind of originally staked the Zanjon claims. So we've got a lot of good in-country experience at the board level and at the local level as well. I myself lived in Argentina once upon a time to study Spanish. So we have a lot of Spanish-speaking professionals in our team. Myself, our new Vice President of Exploration, Ryan Weston, who just joined us today, has spent several years working in Peru, so he speaks Spanish as well. We've got our new CFO and corporate secretary are both native Spanish speakers, and then Bryce with all of his experience in Latin America as well. So we've got, I think, a really solid team from the board level and advisors through management on down to the people that we have on the ground there in terms of discovery success, discovery history, and doing a lot of that work in Latin America.
Share structure and then financials, what you have in the bank. I know it was a great time to raise capital this year, and you raised 4 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. We did a $4 million financing back in February. That was all a hard dollar financing. And the purpose of those funds is to fund this drill program that we have active right now and cover all of our corporate and marketing overhead for, into next year pretty easily. So we've still got about $3 million in the bank right now. I think I just got a cash call this morning for the project in Argentina. So we'll send some more funds down there to keep the drills turning. In terms of Opinaca, we would likely do some sort of financing to support that program a little bit later this year. Last year, we funded most of that with either charity flow through or regular flow through financings, which are fantastic that you can take advantage of that here in Canada. It really helps keep the dilution down when you want to do those big drill programs. So we'll likely do something like that to support Opinaca here in the near future. But yeah, so right now we've got about 3 million in cash in the bank. We have 66 million shares outstanding right now. And I think this morning we were trading around 70 to 75 cents Canadian. So market cap sort of 40 to 45 million Canadian right now. Obviously, that's a big bump from where we were 2 weeks ago. But after the news last week, people getting excited about our drill program in Argentina and the early stage success that we're having down there. We've seen our share price appreciate quite significantly since that February financing.
What's the difference in the cost of drilling down in Argentina? I'm assuming it's a little cheaper than here in Canada.
Some things can be cheaper, some things not. It's probably going to be similar price or maybe even a little bit more expensive actually for this first El Zanjon program compared to our Opinaca project last year. Even though Opinaca was a heli-supported program, we had really efficient drilling up there, drilling up in that Archean rock. We averaged, I think it was almost 114 meters per day in terms of drill production from a single drill rig, which is really quite high. And so when you have that really high drill production, you can really spread out a lot of those other costs per meter, like your helicopter and personnel costs. Down in Argentina right now, we're going a lot slower than that. Trying to get through this overburden has been a challenge for sure. Even the ground itself, a lot of it's very oxidized, and so it's a little bit slower drilling. They did make some good improvements on drill progress for hole number 2. We were typically seeing an average of about 50 meters per day going through hole number 2. So hopefully we can kind of keep up that progress over the next 9 or 10 holes that we have left in this program. But it's seeing that big difference, drilling almost twice as many meters per day in Quebec as we are in Argentina, that kind of drives up some of the cost. So I believe we averaged about $550 per meter Canadian at Opinaca last year. Budget this year is probably going to be somewhere around $600 a meter for that. But down in Argentina, we're probably going to end up spending closer to 700 or 750 a meter, especially because it's a smaller drill program. So we're only set up right now to do about 2,200 meters. We just set up a bit of a camp, but it's nice that it is road accessible. We're renting like a farmhouse down there. They've got a well that we can use to pump water out of to support the drill rig. So everything's kind of right on site there. That's nice from our Canadian standards, where we don't have to use a helicopter, but it still takes a while to get down there, and it takes a while to bring in supplies. It's a bit of a long drive. So I would expect costs to be a little bit higher per meter down there than up in Canada.
What's the long-term story for Targa? Like, are you looking to develop these like to the place that, and obviously a major would take over, or obviously you're looking at discovery stories that no one's even drilled on? Is that going to be your plan going forward, to acquire more projects that are just brand new?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be in this discovery making business, not the mining business. maybe that's like taboo of a mining engineer to say, usually geologists like to say that, but it's the treasure hunt. That's what gets me excited. So we're very much focused on discovery making, growing those discoveries, drilling them out, working through feasibility, but ultimately looking for somebody else to purchase those or acquire the company to get access to those projects. That's our business model right now. Obviously, things could change way down the road depending on what we find, and really developing what we consider to be a gold discovery pipeline. So right now we've got 3 projects in that pipeline. Opinaca, since we've already made a drill discovery out there, would be the most advanced. Zanjon sort of right in the middle because we're actively drilling for the very first drill program there. And then we've got Venidero sort of at the early end of that pipeline. We did some early stage mapping there back in February. We'll probably end up doing some soil sampling, would likely be the next step for Venidero, after the Patagonian winter finishes. But we already know there's gold at Venidero. Earlier stage prospecting, they actually have bedrock at that project, which is a nice change of pace for us. They've identified what's called the Gorgonzola vein over about 2.5 kilometers. It's been traced at surface, and samples from that vein have come back bearing gold and silver, I think up to about 4.5 grams per ton gold. But it seems like it's a bit high up in the epithermal system. So the better sort of silver and gold targets we would expect to be, maybe another 150 meters below surface. So that could be a future drill target over there. From the mapping that we've done, we've identified some other areas of interest in silica caps and areas that could represent upper areas of other epithermal systems. So we'd like to get out there, do some soil sampling probably before the end of the year, follow that with some geophysics, and basically prepare that to be the next maiden drill program, maybe sometime late next year.
Any key takeaways that you want investors to remember from our conversation?
Yeah, a couple of those would be, again, we're focused on making gold discoveries. I think as a team, a huge track record of making those sorts of discoveries, but also just as, with Targa, we've proven back in January when we announced that Opinaca discovery that, we do have what it takes in terms of the team and the right investors and the right people supporting the business to take a project which was essentially moose pasture when we first acquired it, and bring it through in a very short period of time to making a gold discovery. We're looking to do that same thing at Zanjon. I think with the results that we had last week or the observations that we made, we're heading very much in that direction to repeat that success again on another project. And we've got a lot on the go. So with an active drill program now, another drill program planned for Opinaca a little bit later this summer, and then we'll be following up with the next drill program at Zanjon again. We plan on generating a pretty steady flow of exploration and discovery related news going forward. So I think investors can look out for a lot of potential re-rating milestones as we release that news and as we advance these drill programs. So certainly very, very good time to keep an eye on Targa, look out for that news flow and look out for those future assays and results coming in just in the next couple of weeks, probably.
It's nice to actually hear a real, actual exploration discovery story because they don't happen anymore.
Well, people try to say, the best place to find a gold mine is under a head frame, right? So they keep drilling under old projects, and it's true. You can pretty much always find some gold down there, but I find you're accomplishing 2 things when you're doing mineral exploration, and people usually only talk about one of them. People talk about what you find, but the other thing that you're doing as you're exploring is you're also sort of determining what's not there. So you're finding what is there, but as you find out what's there, you kind of determine so you're reducing the potential of what you could potentially find, right? So you're like, oh, we know there's not gold over here. Okay, X off that part of the area. Okay, we know that's not good geology over there. Okay, there's nothing right there. There's only low-grade stuff over here. So you're kind of shrinking in the potential of any project. But when you start on these big grassroots projects like we've been working on at Opinaca and Zanjon, there's no history of that exploration. There's no history of that drilling. So there's nothing on the what's not there list yet. So that keeps the optimism high and the potential still out there for making these big multi-million ounce discoveries. I find a lot of people or a lot of companies that are drilling on more legacy assets or areas with a lot of history of exploration. They've got a lot of potential for finding gold out there. They're successful at finding gold, but, again, because a lot of that area has been sort of drilled off elsewhere, you're kind of shrinking in what the ultimate potential is. And so, they might have potential to make a 1 million ounce discovery and, which is exciting. But, these days, I think what really moves the needle in the market is the multi-million ounce discoveries. The 2 million ounces or 3 million ounces is kind of the new 1 million ounce sort of thing. So if you're drilling in these older areas, a lot of them, you kind of know that you're not going to make a 5 million ounce discovery out there. But we could very much make those types of discoveries on the assets that we're working on at Targa.
And best ways to reach out to you and the company.
Yeah, anybody interested in having a chat or asking any questions on the company or our projects can reach me at Cameron@targaexploration.com. You can also just go to our website, targaexploration.com. I will be uploading a new deck there either today or tomorrow, so watch out for that as well. And yeah, you can get our sign up for our newsletter to make sure you receive our news releases as they get released as well from our website. So I encourage people to do that.